Hey guys, this is Jay Calder with Jay Unboxing here, talking about what we learned over the weekend. And there were a couple of prominent fight cards this weekend. First, there was the biggest show over in Abu Dhabi, staging the light heavyweight title defense from Bivol over Gilberto Ramirez. Then, stateside, we had a bloody super middleweight contest between a pair of unbeatens in David Morrell and Ados Yerbosinali in Minneapolis, Minnesota, or Mississippi, depending on who you're asking. Before we get into it, if you want to see all the details of these results for the weekend, you can head over to jayunboxing.com and check all of that out. And would also love to hear what you guys kind of thought of this weekend, what you learned down in the comments section below. So please be sure to drop that down there. Love to hear it all. Now, first things first, DMITRY Bivol is the fighter of the year. Now, you could argue that that's technically a bit premature, so to speak, but it's kind of hard to see anyone else topping him in the previous 10 months that we've had, or in the next 60 days. Just don't see it happening. I think you could make an argument for someone like Bam Rodriguez, but again, he's not fighting once more this year, and I just don't think that what he's done, as impressive as it is, measures up to what Bivol has accomplished this year. In his most recent bout, of course, as mentioned, he fought Gilberto Ramirez and won a unanimous decision, but it was really in a one-sided boxing lesson fashion. And this is against a top 3 guy in his division. It wasn't even close. That's just an impressive feat in and of itself. But you also have to consider that this was right after doing basically the same to the top guy division lower, who was the consensus pound-for-pound #1 fighter at the time in Canelo Alvarez, in a huge fight. So wasn't the stakes, wasn't the location, wasn't anything. This guy just gets it done back-to-back in these particular fights, and did so in impressive fashion. And remember, in that Canelo fight, he also was the underdog. So you're talking about really not taking into any consideration the circumstances, just getting it done. In terms of his long-term credibility, or whatever you want to call it, Bivol has one name left to prove he's truly special, and that, of course, is Artur Beterbiev, who is a 3-belt champion in this particular weight class, that being light heavyweight. And if he can do that, you have to start considering not just him being the fighter of the year or the fighter of next year, whenever it might happen, but you have to start considering where his place will be all time. But until then, I think it's a pretty easy lock for him being 2022's fighter of the year. Up next, David Morrell is a problem. Now, to be fair, that seemed to be true before his destructive win over Ados Yerbosinali. However, he answered a lot of questions in this encounter and kind of seemed to cement that point. He can go 12 rounds. We know that he can do this, but he can also carry some power with some pop in those shots as well. Again, a new development, a new wrinkle in his game, something that makes him even more dangerous. He can take the pressure, he can adjust if need be, he can box on the back foot, he can obviously come forward, he can plant something on you, he can be more technical. There are a lot of sort of wrinkles in the fabric of his game. Also, you have to be impressed with the fact that if a fighter doesn't go away immediately, he will be patient and execute a game plan. Yet he can still go out there and be a finisher. This is important not only for his development as a fighter, of course, but his development as a drawing fighter, someone who can actually sell tickets, who can kind of force fighters and fans to have to kind of pay attention to him because of that style and because of the fact that he, again, is a more marketable fighter by doing those sorts of things, which you have to pay attention to in Cuban fighters particular, because they can oftentimes go a bit under the radar simply due to the fact that they're so technically proficient. In his case, he is more and more marketable every fight you see him in because he is a fun fighter to watch. And remember, this is said of a 24-year-old fighting in 12 rounders routinely at this point, with less than 10 bouts to his name. Fringe title that he holds or not, I'm not concerned so much with that, but the fact that he's in 12 rounders and looking the part is very, very impressive. He's young, he's athletic, he's fast, he can bang, and he's long-armed and skilled. Yeah, he's a real problem. And finally, boxing is beautiful, but dangerous. Now, obviously, saying that we learned boxing is dangerous this weekend is somewhat tongue-in-cheek, if you want to call it that, but my sentiment behind it really isn't. You always know boxing can have dire consequences, it can have some, terrifying results ultimately, but every so often you will get reminded of such a fact. In the aforementioned Morrell win, Yerbosinali was busted up, looked to have possibly suffered facial damage, and was still coming out round after round. Whether or not he believes he could truly win, he certainly was there to continue to fight. Then, When he was finally stopped in the 12th round, he went down hard, got up the worse for wear, and needed Morrell himself to help him back to Yerbosinoli's corner. That description of sportsmanship, the toughness, the resilience, the skill, all of it, boxing is rightly praised for it. But knowing Yerbosinoli was stretchered out and taken to the hospital soon after the contest is yet another reminder of why combat athletes deserve respect like no other. That complete contrast of those two sort of metrics, if you will, of just how beautiful this sport can be and yet how frightening in other ways it can be, is really one of those things that just never really gets completely comfortable when you're watching boxing. It's something that you sort of have to be willing to ingest, that kind of poisonous side to it, unfortunately. But yeah, I mean, it's just unfortunate when you see. You certainly don't want to make it take away from Morrell's performance, but certainly kind of gives you that perspective nonetheless. And some quick hits here. Shavkat Rakhimov is hardly ever in a dull fight, and he and Joe Cordina should be a fun one. Obviously, he beat Zelfa Barrett for a vacant title at 130 pounds, a title made vacant by the fact that Joe Cordina wasn't able to defend his title in due time, according to that sanctioning body. Should be a good fight in 2023, and it's apparently already signed up for, so certainly a fun one to watch. I would also say Kenshiro Teraji probably needs to start being discussed in regards to top 10 pound-for-pound fighters. Big win over Hiroto Kayaguchi, unifying and won a title in his 10th pro fight. Yes, the loss to Masamichi Yabuki isn't great, but it was avenged convincingly, and now he's even more impressive. Again, at the very least, it needs to be in that discussion. I would also say it might be time for Jason Rosario to think about life beyond boxing. Some fighters have the ability to, lose a fight, win a fight, lose a fight, win a fight, and ultimately they can come back. Jorge Linares is a prime example of someone who, in his kind of prime, so to speak, would lose but could come back and do some impressive things. That's not true of all fighters. Rosario seems to be a fighter who had a very nice high for himself, but now just seems to drop at a stiff wind. He just isn't able to take a punch, not to the body, not to the head. His defense isn't where it needs to be. His offense isn't impressive enough to get him out of those jams, and it just might be that time. Again, I am in no position to tell anyone what to do with their own lives or careers, but it's certainly something that I would potentially pose if I was asked that sort of question. And obviously just want to end it here with my thoughts are there, of course, for previously mentioned Yerbosinoli. He was taken to the hospital, and hopefully he's doing well and can make a speedy and in full recovery, of course. That should be an obvious one, but just want to make sure I throw that out there for what that's worth. And let me know what you guys think down about this weekend in the comments. Would kind of love to know what you learned, your kind of biggest takeaways, who impressed you the most. Be sure to let me hear that down in the comments section below. Please be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, and follow me on Twitter at jcalderon_JOB. You can email me at jagunboxing@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you there. Also, be sure to check out jagunboxing.com for schedule, results, betting odds, rankings, all of that good stuff. And as always, until next time.